Hi, everyone. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you all so much for joining. This is a really exciting panel that you're going to learn the inside scoop about how to not only land your dream job in cybersecurity, but also how to negotiate the package that you want. My name is Jan D'Alessandro. I'm a senior advisor to the Lookout Foundation. I'm an attorney by training. And I can tell you the reason that women tend to fall behind in their salaries is because they don't start with the salary that they deserve. And so I've got two experts here. I've got Deidre Diamond, who's the founder and CEO of CyberSN and the founder of Secure Diversity. She is one of the most successful agency recruiters in the cybersecurity space and really committed to helping more women enter the field. And my colleague, Brenley Brotman, the VP of Global Recruiting and the chair of the Lookout Foundation, who is going to give you also some serious inside scoop on what inside recruiters are looking for in candidates. So we're going to start out. I'm going to start with you, Brenley, and basically you guys are going to have a point counterpoint between Brenley giving you the inside scoop from the internal recruiter and Deidre from the agency recruiter. So, Bren, when you have open positions at Lookouts, where do you go to find qualified candidates? And what advice would you give to job seekers about where they should go to find open positions?
Yeah, good question. So we have lots of open positions at lookout.com/careers if you're interested. But we generally will find applicants through a lot of the mediums that normal job posters go out to or candidates go out to seek, like Indeed.com, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and the like. The most successful candidates that we have are through employee referrals, right? And so I would do a big plug for networking. We also use LinkedIn in order to reach the passive job seeker. We use GitHub and Stack Overflow to look for some technical talent and verify their backgrounds. So, it doesn't stop. We continue to source and look for talent. Where folks should go to find a job, certainly the Day of Security jobs page, which you could go to in your spare time. There are a lot of aggregators out there of places that scrape jobs and put it in one site, like Indeed.com. I am going to give a shameless plug to a platform that Deidre has created in CyberSN, and I would highly recommend that folks also build relationships with partner agencies like Deidre's that specialize in cybersecurity, because there's not a lot of them out. Actually, Deidre's is number one.
Yeah, so maybe Deidre, you want to tell us a little bit about the platform and how it works? Yeah. Any other tips that you may have on where to find the jobs?
Well, yeah, only because this is the conversation, right? Like Brenley just mentioned how many different platforms she needs to go to and still have internal recruiters and still work with external agencies like myself. And what that means is that we have a broken job searching and matching system, because at the end of the day, those are humans going to all those platforms, whether they work in Brenley's department or they work in an agency, and they're recruiting, because we're recruiting passive job seekers. A passive job seeker is somebody who doesn't want to go deal with those cruddy job boards, all of them, and deal with all those ATSs, and they're just not miserable enough, but they are open to another opportunity, right? So I see that inside and out, like so much so it hurt my soul when I founded CyberSN. And I thought, I have to change this. I have to use technology to solve searching and matching. And that's what we've done, which is replace resumes with profiles, replace job descriptions with the same taxonomy that we're using with profiles, and matching on a common language job taxonomy, specifically for cybersecurity. Now,
so that's really good point that you raised, because what I really wanted to get in deeper with insight from you guys is about how does someone make their resume or profile stand out from the crowd? Like, what are tips that you give them? Like, what are, how does that work? So
I will give just the quick tip. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at a job posting, and your profile or resume does not have components of that job posting, then you need to rethink it. right? Because recruiters look at, I posted one position and I had over 700 applicants, right? And so you need a way to kind of narrow the scope of the folks that you're looking for as a match. So make it easy when you're applying for a role and you feel you're qualified for a role, customize your resume, right? Also, in your resume, if you don't have a lot of work experience, I'd highly recommend that you go out and you do some volunteering and you put that experience on your resume, that you build out your LinkedIn recommendations, right? And your LinkedIn network, right? To have some additional information about the things that you've done. But definitely make it easy for the recruiters to see and the hiring managers that you would be a good fit.
Yeah. And to add to that, again, if I'm a passive job seeker, no way, you know how much time that is? Meaning if I don't hate my job and I'm just sort of unhappy, that's so much work. And that's exactly what has to be done. That's exactly what has to be done today. So the only thing I would add to that is that job descriptions may or may not actually be what they're looking for, match what they're looking for. And so that's why you have to do it, is that people are cutting and pasting job descriptions at such a high level, somebody else's job description. It's really not exactly the job. So it's unfortunate what Brenley's saying. It's exactly what motivates me to change this system. We're going to prove it in cyber how to change it. And until then, that as a resume, that's what you have to do. She's got 700 of them. How are you going to come up on that list? How is the search matching going to make you at the top? Well, matching that one job description as much as possible. And yet, my gosh, that means we're changing our resume every time we're applying to a job. That's so time consuming.
And what the good news is.
Question. Oh, go ahead, Brenley.
For sure. The good news also in a company is that we build relationships with candidates. We have the opportunity, even though we see on their profile, they may be applying for a certain job. We certainly look at opportunities for them across the company. And so the good news is that even if you show up in a certain way, please do know that the recruiting teams, both on the agency side and the corporate side, will look at opportunities that would be the best match. And if it's not right now, we look for your background to be a fit in the future.
And so I have two questions. One is, I would say also, and I tell everyone this, is like, find someone who works at the company that you want to work for and let them walk your resume over to the recruiting team, because it's always having like a personal connection, I think, like is one of the key things. But the question I wanted to ask you is, how do you guys feel about cover letters? I get asked this all the time. It's like, the resume, there's the job description, email. Should you attach a separate cover letter or just the body of an email? Or how do you guys look at that?
Really good question. From a corporate perspective, I haven't looked at a cover letter in 20 years. So we just don't. I'm sure it drops into our applicant tracking system and it is there as an attachment. We'd have to unbury it. So they're not heavily looked at.
Okay, good. All right, good. Okay, so I want to move on. Oh, sorry, Deidre.
I was going to say I agree. Same thing on the agency side. They're not being read.
Less is more. Less is more. Okay, so now you get the interview. Your resume stood out. You get the interview. So what do you do? How do you prepare yourself for the interview?
I was just talking about this. I'm sorry, Brenley.
No,
I was just talking about this in my booth because it's definitely a problem in that so many people are coming to interviews, maybe not totally excited about it because the job description was kind of a match, and so what I'm telling everybody is go to every job interview completely interested in that company and possibly that job, but also being interesting. And those are the two things that you got to come with. You got to act like every interview is your dream job, because you can't rely on that job description. You can't rely on whoever you're talking to first even speak cybersecurity, never mind whatever it is that you're talking about. And so really it's going to be about being able to be interested enough to figure out what the job is and answer a question by asking a question too, and finding out about that job, but really making a connection. People hire people. So if they like you as a human because you're you're prepared. You came in with some really interesting conversations to be had. You're going to find that you're going to get further in that process, which is already muddy of like, maybe the person you're talking to the first time doesn't even really know the job themselves, unfortunately. Right? Brenley?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would add to that is, do your research on the company, right? Take a look at their news feed, Google a bit about their history, right? Just be prepared in knowing who you're talking to, and practice the art of storytelling, right? Recruiters and hiring managers, they like to have a conversation. They would like to have you illustrate your experience, right? Just having all the key words is boring, right? They want to have storytelling. Research the team that you're talking to on LinkedIn, okay? Do some digging. Understand what their interests are. If you are studying to become a pilot and you see that on the person's LinkedIn profile, have those discussions, right? And so it's all about personalization and being authentic.
Authentic connections. Yeah, we talk about that a little bit later about like body language and connections and this and that. So what happens if you walk out of the interview and think, God, I just blew that. I was not feeling well. I blew it. What do you do if you walked out thinking like,
I love that question, because you know what? That happens. And it can be corrected, or you answered a question in a way that after you're like, oh my gosh, I answered that wrong. Why did I do that? Or how did I do? I personally think that sending a thank you follow-up is always necessary. And so you can put in that thank you follow-up sort of your mistake or your mess up or something you thought of afterwards. Like, there's no such thing as anybody being perfect. It's all about people taking accountability for what they say and do. And so if you're willing to, share that, then it's going to really make a positive difference, I think.
Yeah. I completely agree, Deidre. It's all about showing up as being real. I mean, I have been on candidate interviews where the most bizarre things have occurred, especially working, from your home, remote work, right? People like real people. I really enjoy it when a candidate says to me via email, I had another thought on ...
Yes.
Or, whatever it may be. It's the value of just being authentic and also a little bit of humor, right? Remember, Deidre mentioned the likability piece, is if you could be as real as possible, add a little bit of humor to it, and just have the follow-up, that's going to go a long way.
Right.
Yeah. If they don't like it, then you don't want to work there. Like, if they don't like that type of a conversation and that you're really wanting, like, that's your sign. And I think that's the number one thing that I like to tell people is that, you do a lot of interviews when job searching, and it's very easy to walk away and say, I didn't get that job, or I wasn't qualified for that job. I'd prefer that people walk away and be like, I don't want that job. I want you to interview to know whether you want it or not. And of course, make sure they want you. Don't put all the power of whether you're qualified and interested in their hands. So it's not good for anybody.
Yeah, because you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. That's a really good point.
Absolutely.
All right. So what I'm hearing here is be prepared, research the heck out of the company, the job, the requirements, the person, authentic connection. Try to make sure that you can connect with people, because you don't want to work with people you don't. So now you made it through. You got the interview. You nailed it. Sometimes you're gonna have like 8 rounds of interviews before you actually get the job offer. So the next thing is, they say, okay, let's talk about your salary, the package. So let's start with Brenley, and then I want to hear, Brenley, like what you think about, like, as an in-house recruiter, like, what are the levers? What do people look at? And then, Deidre, I want to know how you help your candidate who really, really wants this job nail it. So Brenley, let's start with you.
Yeah. So when you think about how to answer the question, what are your salary expectations? Years ago, we used to be able to say to candidates, okay, how much do you make? And what was your W-2 last year? Show us a copy of it, right? And that was terrific, because we knew exactly how much they made. They couldn't fudge it. Or we could do something in the background check. Those days are gone, right? And thank God those days are gone, because what we're really seeing now are companies have to stand behind how they evaluate positions, their salary ranges, how much they're going to pay, right? And when you're asked that question, it's important for you to not bet against yourself. Okay. Recruiters want to know and they'll push you. So what are you looking for? Can you give me a sense of it? And I would say that I'm interested in understanding what it might look like. In some states, they're required to give salary ranges on the job posting. Legally, you can ask an employer, tell me what the range is. Okay, so they will probably give you a minimum and a maximum. Safe to say that the budget for the position is usually the midpoint of the minimum and the maximum. So that's generally what they're looking at. And it wouldn't surprise me if when a company comes back with a number or a range, they're being really authentic. They need to be. So number one, don't bet against yourself. And number two, just tell the recruiter that you're interested in exploring it further and you want to make sure that the offer is competitive.
So
unless you have a number.
When you say the range, so the recruiter will give you a salary range. Will they also talk to you about stock options at the same time?
It's a very good question. So these are two different things. So when I am talking to a candidate and I want to understand what they're looking for, okay, candidate's going to say $1, okay, or they're going to say between 95 cents and $1.05, okay? Mm-hmm. The recruiter on the behind the scenes is going to have a budget for a role, and they're going to have a range to the position, a salary range that they could pay, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of factors that go into a competing offer. They have to factor in things like internal parity and equity, right? They have to look at a total comp package. Potentially the company might have a bonus program or stock options or RSUs. So all of those pieces will come into play. And I will let Deidre answer her side of the question, but I do want to give additional tips on once you have passed the what salary am I expecting, then what negotiation tips can you use?
Okay. So let me comment on before that. So, as Brenley just highlighted, this is super complex. That the Equal Pay Act did make it easier for us all, thank goodness, which means you don't have to tell what you're currently making. And it puts more responsibility on the employer to know what they want to pay. Now, here comes the trick to all of this is, we said that we're having this conversation after all the interviews. Well, oh my gosh, how many times people do that and it's a waste of time because the salary is not a match. So we're now seeing the market, and certainly, all of us out there working, we're having that conversation up front, minimally on the salary, because everything else is sort of not really a deal breaker when the salary is correct. The RSUs typically figure themselves out, and bonuses are what bonuses are or are not, and what have you. And so the salary conversation is starting to be had in the beginning. And the problem with that is that if you give the wrong salary to an internal recruiter, you're going to have a lot more trouble dealing with that situation than you are with an agency. With an agency, we've got so many different opportunities across so many different companies that have different salary bands that it's very possible you're still in the conversation and you didn't lose out. Like, we're still talking to you, but with an internal organization, it's harder. So I really feel the heartache for this. And so you have to do your research. What's the industry paying? So CyberSN is publishing this data every 90 days. So every job card at CyberSN has our lowest salary range that we placed out in the last 90 days, and then the highest. There's no average. I just want you to know, because gone are the days of, somebody with 10 years experience is going to make more than somebody with 5. No, that's not how it works. If somebody at 10 has the same skill set, going to do the same job or doing the same job, they're going to get paid the same. So it's really about understanding what the market is paying for those jobs. And then the other challenge is, people will take different amounts for different jobs. I know lots of people that will take a little bit less than what they said once they figure out what the job is and realize they're going to be trained in some of the most cutting edge things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I really think that we need to be, the professional has to be very careful, but also to not undersell or oversell themselves. So I find that the response of, I'm seeing the market is paying X, Y, and Z
Mm-hmm.
versus that's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what your position is paying? And then, as Brenley said, get them to give you that salary range immediately so that you know, do you want to play with this or not play with this? And the last thing I would say is it's playing with it, because that salary range may be the salary range today. But after they interview and realize that their salary is too low, it's I would say 50 to maybe it's 70% of the time, I got to go look, the salary is raised at the offer. That salary band.
Interesting.
You know,
So that's a question. You know, I have a question, because a lot of times you're going into an interview, and it's been sort of traditional that you don't ask about the salary until you get to the salary negotiation. Now, if you're working with an outside recruiter like Deidre, you will tell them, you know, this is what the range is, right? But would you, if a candidate came into an interview with you, Brenley, and said, so how much does this pay? Would you look down on that question, or how would you handle that?
not at all. You know, the good news in all of this is that we want to create a fit for the candidate. We want to make the hire, right? We are not about how can we squeeze the last 5 cents. It's the opposite. How can we it's never really it's never about the money, right? It never is, right? It's about the opportunity that the position provides. It's about career path. It's about the relationship with the boss. A lot of people say, you know, you come for a logo, you stay for the boss. The money discussion should not be adversarial, and don't walk into it feeling like it needs to be, right? If you come to it with an authentic approach and a flexibility, it's really important that you may have anxiety around it, but you don't show up arrogant. And if there are areas that you don't know, you want to lead with that vulnerability, and that you really are looking for the most competitive as possible. Now, if you have a scenario where you're truly walking away from something, okay, so you've had a bonus that pays out in June and they want you to start at the end of May or something, or you want to save for a house, or you're interested in some understanding of what kind of the non-reoccurring comp benefits might be, don't be afraid to talk about that, because in the back pocket, the recruiters have ways of addressing that, right? Once again, it's about how authentic you are and how flexible you are. We can tell pretty quickly when a candidate is just interested in the money. There are tell signs all the time. And generally, for Lookout, they're not the best fit for us. We won't go forward. And we generally find those individuals job hop a lot. So once again, just come forward with expecting an honest conversation, and starting from that point of trust, I guarantee you the company will want to create a package that can be compelling.
That makes sense. So
as we said before, wrong company to work for.
Yeah.
Truly.
And so again, going back to the stock option question, do companies generally does a salary range usually come with a commensurate stock option range?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Sure does.
And so, and that would be part of your total compensation package. And what about benefits and vacation? You know, a lot of companies have moved to, you know, what's it called? Unlimited PTO.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So with regards to ranges, I want to do a caveat. There is a difference in working at a Series A company, a Series B company, you know, startups under 100 employees. I can guarantee you they're not going to have a salary range. They're not going to be going out to compensation surveys like Radford and figuring out what in IC level you are, like all that. It's not going to happen, right? They hire somebody and then they figure out what that person's worth. And they figure out how much should we pay that guy. I mean, it's not as formulated. So as you get to larger companies, things are going to be more structured, and that includes benefits, right? And so with benefits and vacation time, if the company has a standard vacation amount that you accrue per year, you start out with 3 weeks. It is not possible in any company I've ever been at for you to ask for that additional week because the system is accruing it at a certain rate. Some negotiation power that you do have is to say with your boss, I was planning a trip to X during the summer. And, I'm wondering if we can have an agreement about what that would look like. I really don't want to take a week unpaid, right? It's all about that relationship. HR wouldn't tell you about that, but oftentimes that's the way to negotiate it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, I'm seeing some interesting questions in the chat. Anne asks, how do recruiters feel about applicants that apply to another company when they may have only been at their current company for 6 months to a year and they want to leave?
Back in the day, we'd say, don't call them if it's a perm role, right, Brenley? Back in the 90s.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. 90s, we were not doing that. Today, look, if all your jobs are that and you're not a contractor or your last 2 or 3 positions, definitely going to be a little bit of a what's going on conversation. And I don't think in today's landscape it's going to stop a recruiter from calling unless they have better applicants to call. And so within an agency, not going to be as much of a problem as, let's say, an internal recruiter. So it is a problem to job hop. It is. If you're not a contractor. And yet if it happens once, it's, twice even, people are going to want to know why. You just have to be prepared.
And usually it's, you do want to know the story behind it. As Deidre mentioned, years ago, it used to be if you weren't at a company X period of time, we wouldn't consider you. Now, 2 years is like, wow, they spent 2 years at that company, right? And so it's just different. We're always thoughtful around people that just jump logo to logo to logo to build their resume. And once again, we figure that out during the interview process, and we would address that concern there.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. This is another interesting question. Jaisri says, what is the best way to explain resume gaps, especially when you're trying really hard to land the right job?
I like the truth, especially if you were gone to have a child or care for an elderly parent or a sibling or whoever. There's no justification of who you love. If you're caring for somebody you love and that's why you took off work, whatever the reason, I suggest making a little story there that people can read.
I completely agree. I've had candidates that took time off to travel around the world, and I'm jealous. I reach out to those individuals. Let's have a conversation. How did you do that? Right. And quite honestly, I'm based in San Francisco Bay Area. In our industry, in our field, people are getting wacky amounts of money just by being at the right place at the right time. And they have the luxury to do things that I'd be jealous about. So like Deidre said, just be ready for that storytelling and that authenticity, and it's okay.
And I think something you guys said earlier too is that if you don't have the skills from a job, go out and volunteer, take a course, do something that's going to help you get the skills that are in the job requirement. So one of the things we've also talked about is like there's the bands, like what are the ranges, the levers that you can pull, and some other questions that we have like about what do recruiters have in their back pocket. Like, what is the stuff that you've got to kind of speak at them to understand, like how you can get the best offer that you can get? Because I'm just going to jump in as I'm a lawyer, and I've been the general counsel of 4 venture-backed startups, and I've taught negotiation classes. A lot of women. I've been shocked where I've gone to these, women-oriented seminars and spoken, and shocked that I assume everyone wants to learn how to negotiate a deal. That like engineers who built major products at Google are saying to me, well, I don't know how to negotiate my salary increase. I don't know how to get a promotion. And I know that the guys are generally, as a general sweeping generalization, more aggressive coming in. And whatever, salary you start with, that's where you start. And it's hard to get beyond that. And there's all these discussions about gender equal pay, but a lot of companies, it's not. So so I'd like you to address that. Like, how can they make sure that you're going to get the best deal that you can coming in?
Yeah. So as Deidre mentioned, I agree. It starts early on with the recruiter, or if you're talking right with the hiring manager, about talking about things that are important to you. understanding the salary, if you can, as much information as you can get. If you do look at marketing competitiveness, that's great. But let me give you some actual details. Let's say that you're offered a position for $100,000, right? And the company comes back and they offer you $95,000 and some stock options, right? You have to understand what's important to you. I can guarantee you that you are not going to lose sleep over 5,000, but the company will have concern about how you show up and having a discussion around the gap, right? You want to be as transparent as you can. You want to understand that there are other components that companies consider. And as I mentioned, internal parity, like where other people that are doing the same work. If there's a stock option part to your offer and you don't know what in the world stock options are, have that conversation, because there's a big value in stock options potentially and in RSUs. So you want to understand that, right? And so you want to make sure that you're not fighting the wrong reason. If this is a company that can truly offer you career opportunities, you're challenged by the work, you feel it's a fair shake, you love the boss, I would recommend you moving forward. Now, a tip and a trick, as I mentioned, the sign-on piece. If there is a reason why the sign-on makes sense, right? And it isn't really, I was hoping to make 95, right? You really want to describe why the delta is important, okay? Generally, companies can work with sign-ons. Generally, companies can work with equity, so options or RSUs. The base salary itself, please walk into it knowing that they don't want to play a game. They're not looking at, gosh, how much can I get her for? You know, how cheap can we go? There's no interest, because once you're behind the scenes, you'll understand, you'll have a sense of it, right? So do understand that if there's not a lot of movement that can happen on the base salary, it's because of internal equity issues.
Yeah, and to further that, Brenley, that's exactly it. It's you were talking about like turning off the employer. You know, this can be done. Negotiations can turn people off, and that is the biggest risk. And the number one reason it gets to be a turnoff is that people start negotiating before they know the whole total comp. Start negotiating, the salary's a little bit lower, but I don't really know all the benefits. I haven't done my research to see if it's going to be a cost difference for me. And then all of a sudden I go do that, and now I see that's a cost difference. Or I'm in the conversation about stock, and I don't really know the difference between RSUs and common stock and all the different. You got to come educated, as well as get the whole package before you start negotiating. You know, you might not care about that 5,000 when you see bonuses and sign-ons and the benefits and time off and all that stuff. You might not even want to ask. Doesn't mean that you couldn't. But so that's the first thing, is really know the whole package so that you have the conversation that Brenley's talking about, which is a constructive conversation, market knowledge, to say where you want to see the levers moved.
Yeah. The other thing is there's how you ask. And that's something that I wanted to touch on a little bit, is the negotiating techniques. And when we were preparing for this talk, there's 2 books that, if you guys have time, that I really recommend. Getting to Yes by Fisher and Ury. The other one is Never Split the Difference by Christopher Voss. Christopher Voss is a hostage negotiator. And these books, talk a lot about negotiating styles and what's successful, that, in everything. And they talk about, a lot of the stuff we've talked about. Knowledge is power. Know your bottom line, when you're going in. Don't sweat the small stuff. But also a lot about body language. The body language, the connections. We talked a lot about creating authentic connections with the person. Don't waste time, if you don't like them, just don't keep going and waste your time. Like, time is, money. And in some salary negotiations, they say, if you can, always let them go first. Let the recruiter or the employer tell you what their ranges are, and then you go back. Presenting a range is something that works on both sides. But also, complementing the monetary terms with non-monetary. And be persistent. But again, every single thing comes down to the authentic connection. And work with these people.
You're so right. I would add to that people are nervous going into the interview process. It is the strangest most artificial way of, let me figure out in an hour if I want to work with you for the next 2 years on both sides, right? The offer process is so anxiety provoking for every candidate that I go through, right? You could see it's hard. You have families, you have commitments, you don't want to be taken advantage of. There's all these things that swirl through your mind. Where I see it go wrong is when people show up, they have all this anxiety and they show up with arrogance. And that gets to be really tough.
Yep.
Because the recruiters who can see that, they try and chip away at, let's get down to what's really important, what motivates you. But if you come to it with you owe me, I have 6 competing offers, what do you got to give? That's not going to work, right? You just have to understand your anxiety, sit on it for a little while, and just come through as authentic.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I always say you attract more bees with honey. Like, show up, showing that you're super interested and that you really would love their support in working through compensation, total compensation, and then just dive into it and be positive and upbeat and show that you're interested in the role. And if anybody isn't interested in having a conversation like Brenley and I would with you about comp in a genuine, kind, loving manner, knowing that we all are want the same things, then wrong place for you.
Yeah.
You got to show up first. You got to give them the chance.
There's some interesting conversations happening in the chat about, how do you guys feel about hiring a career coach and hiring someone to help with the resume? Do you think those is money?
I can tell you that's what CyberSN does all day long. We're coaching both the employer and the professional on how to do all this. I mean, Brenley's top of the food chain as it pertains to this skill set, and so am I, literally. And so most people they're interacting with are not going to be us. And so employers need a lot of training. Professionals need a lot of training. I think coaching, practicing all matters. Why not? It's only going to help you in life in general. But I think practicing, speaking and talking, that's why Security exists,
Right.
That's opportunity. That's why we all wanted to do this. It's nerve-wracking to speak about these types of things. And so the more practice we have speaking, the better. And that's what coaches can do. In terms of resumes, again, I think they're ridiculous. I prefer profiles. Check out profiles at CyberSN. But that being said, it's more about your speak once you're in the interview than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, another tip for recruiters internally, we look at LinkedIn profiles, right? We hardly look at, we look at resumes, but we always know that LinkedIn profiles are probably most updated. And for folks that are not starting their career, but further out, that's the first place that we go. So I would highly recommend that you have your LinkedIn updated. That's going to be your branding card. And secondly, with regards to resume writers, I would recommend actually a step before that. Find yourself a mentor. Find yourself someone that you can learn from, that you can say, take a look at this, right? There's lots of examples of how to write a resume, right? You could go to lots of sites for that, but those that are already in the field that can guide you would be my best recommendation.
Yeah. There's a really good question just popped up in the chat.
Yeah.
What happens if you do agree to a salary and you've been there for a year, but find out that your coworkers are making several $1,000s more than what you're making? Seems like they've got the same background and experience. What do you do?
Take it, Brenley. That's
all right. All right. I don't like to say everyone always feels that ... right? Because we all do, and we all also don't know everyone's story. Right? I have an optic about how I show up at work and how Deidre shows up at work, and my perception may or may not be the full picture, right? And so I would focus less on what the other girl is getting or the other guy is getting, and more on that authentic conversation with your boss about what's important to you. Be proactive about your career advancement. If you're looking at larger scope or if you're looking at a leadership role, talk about that, talk about what goals it would take to get there. I've always said to people, if you work really hard and you have a great approach, the money is going to come, right? And so you want to make sure you're working with an organization that aligns with your values and you can have those authentic conversations.
So what you're saying is that companies would not generally go back and sort of make up. If someone's been getting paid more than you for, a year or 2 or 3 or 5
That's a good question. So companies, I would say that are higher than Series B, always, like at Lookout, we always look at internal equity and parity, right? For same work, right? That's, and thank goodness for some of the laws that have come out, right? There's a big risk in not showing up correctly and actually paying your individuals correctly. So we do audits all the time to make sure for similar roles, similar experience, et cetera, that we're paying fairly. If you feel like there is a big gap, right, have that conversation. Do companies, have I seen that happen before where companies will look at individual circumstances? Sure. They're more likely to look at a group overall, but I would highly recommend that you have the conversation and go into it being curious. Yep. Don't go walk into it being accusatory and, hey, I'm not paid as much as this guy, and you're going to get your employer on their heels, right? Show up in a way that you're going to start a dialogue. Show up in a way that you will want to understand what it would take, right, in order to get from A to B, and allow that conversation to start.
That makes sense. All right, so we've got just a couple minutes left, maybe one, if we're ending at 1:45. Quick closing. What do you want? One thing you want people to walk away from here, Deidre?
Don't settle, and that's hard to say when finances are on the line and everybody needs money to, have their livelihood. But we don't have to settle if we're willing to really engage in every interview we have as if it's the interview for the job of their dreams, and you knew it was to be. Create opportunity for yourself so you don't have to settle.
Okay, Brenley.
I would agree with that. And I would add, it's an incredible market and you matter, right? For companies like Lookout, like Deidre's organization, we want to understand you better. We want to get to know you. We understand that if the timing's not right now, it will be in the future. And we want to build that relationship over time. So please understand that you matter and reach out to get as much advice and mentorship that you can, but it is your market right now.
That's right. And Teresa, yes, volunteer opportunities. Volunteer with Day of Security. You will meet everyone. And I'm going to leave everyone with this is mindfulness. There's been a lot of sessions about this. Be really thoughtful and mindful about what you want to spend your life doing. Really think about, put yourself in the shoes, try to visualize yourself in one of these roles, and if that's what you want to spend your time doing. And there's this, and network. You're going to meet 90% of the jobs. I've had a lot of jobs. I'm a kind of a job hopper, but but that's just because of the opportunity. 90% of my jobs came through personal connections, So this was amazing. You guys have given so much information to all the attendees. Thank you so much. There's lots of ways to connect with everyone here, and thank you to the audience. You guys cannot believe the wealth of information that's been going on in the comment sidebar. We're such a collaborative, incredible group. So thank you, Brenley. Thank you, Deidre. Thank you, everyone who shared their knowledge with all the other attendees.
Thank you, Jan.
That's a wrap.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest.